Derek Caldwell knelt on the marble of the Hamilton Mansion's foyer, working soft circles with his brush until the faint scuff vanished and the stone caught the light like water. Night work had taught him to move without noise, to breathe like a visitor in his own life. He was 35, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, careful. The elevator chimed. He did not look up. Footsteps stopped. A white woman in an emerald dress stood above him, considering him. Not the bucket. Isabella Hamilton spoke evenly. "I need a companion tomorrow. $5,000. Black tie. No questions." He listened. 5,000 echoed through Derek like a church bell, steady and impossible. He pictured Mia's inhaler, the electric bill stamped in red, boots she had outgrown, a field trip permission slip hidden under crayons. He also pictured the school clock at 3:15, the face scanning the door. He stood, not tall, just present. His voice was even. "I pick up my daughter after school, Miss Hamilton. She worries when I am late." Isabella's gaze did not waver. 7 o'clock, a car, clothes provided. "I need reliability." He nodded once, as if signing a contract with himself, returned to work. That evening the apartment greeted him with the clatter of pipes and the smell of reheated soup. Mia sat on the windowsill, breathing a fog circle onto the glass, eyes bright as coins. She launched at him with absolute faith and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You came back," she whispered. "Every time," he answered. They ate slowly at the table, mismatched bowls, a cartoon placemat, Comet, the stuffed rabbit, lounging like an honored guest. He described a funny job that needed a suit. Mrs. Rodriguez would read with her and bake cookies. He promised to call at bedtime. After dishes, Mia drew stars while he sorted bills into stacks that never shrank. The lamp hummed. The calendar had circles around a school recital and a free clinic day. When she yawned, he tucked her in, set the rabbit under her chin, and traced the outline of her curls with 2 fingers. "Read the fox tomorrow," she insisted. "Over the phone, if you must." "Deal," he said. When quiet settled, he stared at the ceiling and breathed through the uneasy thought that good luck sometimes arrived, wearing another person's shoes. He set an alarm and slept on the couch. The boutique smelled of leather and restraint. A tailor circled him with measuring tape and a look that suggested he was taming a proud horse. "Shoulders?" the man murmured. "Then length, then presence." Derek stared into the trifold mirror and saw a stranger trying on his bones. The tuxedo lay against his dark skin like a statement and a question. Bow tie stubborn, collar clean. The tailor smiled finally. "Money that whispers," he said. "Not money that shouts." Derek nodded, checked his phone, and found a photo from Mrs. Rodriguez. Mia grinning, flour on her nose, cookies like lopsided moons. 7 arrived precisely, like a polite knock on a classroom door. When Derek opened, Isabella stood in the hallway without entourage, midnight gown catching the weak bulb's glow. She glanced past him at the refrigerator gallery of drawings and the taped list of emergency numbers. Mia peeked out in star pajamas, rabbit tucked under her arm, eyes solemn and curious. Derek knelt, kissed the crown of her head, and placed the rabbit in his pocket. "For luck," she said. "Always," he answered. Mrs. Rodriguez waved from the doorway opposite. Downstairs, a car waited, a promise not made, but still offered. The city unspooled outside the tinted window, blocks of lit windows and blurred taillights, flowing like a calm river. They shared a silence that did not pinch. Isabella handed him a small envelope with a seat number, an emergency contact, and a card written in tidy script. "Thank you for steadiness," it read. He tucked it safely away. "Why me?" he asked, finally, careful but honest. "Because you stand like a lighthouse," she said, "and because my world is full of people who mistake volume for virtue. I need quiet that holds." He watched the lights and did not argue. The mansion hosting the gala behaved like a theater pretending to be a home. Warm light spilled from tall windows while hired valets guided arrivals like dancers in a simple waltz. Inside, a chandelier scattered icy stars across polished stone. Isabella skimmed through clusters of donors, hand on Derek's sleeve, introducing him with practiced ease. "An old friend of the family," she said, and something in her tone made the claim sound unremarkable. Curious eyes flitted over his tuxedo, his calm posture, his dark skin. He kept his shoulders where the tailor had placed them and remembered to breathe steadily. Near a towering arrangement of lilies, a silver-haired donor trapped him with cordial questions that felt like thin nets. "And what is your field?" he asked Derek, tone bright with evaluation. Before Derek chose a version of the truth, Isabella answered without missing a beat. "He's the most reliable person I know. We go back years." The donor blinked, recalibrated, and shifted to safe topics about the pediatric wing. After he left, Derek poured Isabella water, steady hand meeting fingers, her shoulders softened by a measure almost invisible. "Thank you," she said, as if he had halted weather. Between speeches and soft applause, Derek mapped the room the way night workers learn to map spaces that are not theirs. Exits, stairs, the rhythm of servers, the corners where people retreat to manage expression. He sent a quick text downstairs during a musical interlude. "Fox chapter at 9, promise." Mrs. Rodriguez replied with a photo of Mia in pajamas. Thumbs up, rabbit triumphant. Relief threaded through his chest like warm string. He returned to Isabella's side as cameras flashed. He did not try to look like anything more than steady company. Sometimes that is the rarest offering available tonight. Later, she grazed his sleeve and suggested air in the winter garden where palms rose under glass like well-mannered ghosts. The path ran beside a narrow pool. City dust softened the stars beyond the skylight. They stood where the music drifted, but did not dictate. "You carry quiet like a craft," she said. "If questions come, say we grew up near one another, that we have always looked out for each other. It protects more than you." He studied her face and saw courage stitched to worry. "Protects you from whom?" he asked softly. She looked toward the doorway. A man filled the doorway like a sentence arriving late. He was older, hair the color of steel left in weather, posture learned in rooms that listen. His eyes, gray and assessing, moved from Isabella to Derek and stopped there, widening with something that was not simple recognition. The world seemed to pause its careful spinning. "Marcus," the man said, the name falling as though rescued from a long silence. Derek felt his breath hitch against his ribs. "That is not my name," he answered, keeping his voice gentle. Isabella's fingers tightened, then steadied. The man stood very still, haunted. Isabella said the man's name softly. "Elliot," and the syllables carried both ice and history. He blinked, collected himself, and offered a smile that could not hide the tremor underneath. "My mistake," he murmured. "You resemble someone I knew once." He glanced at Isabella as though asking permission to remain. She gave none. Her expression requested distance with flawless manners. Elliot retreated 2 steps, but his gaze returned to Derek as if pulled by wire. Derek felt the air cool. A portrait in the ballroom had worn a thin scar on the cheek. Elliot's face held the same echo tonight. They did not flee. Flight would have written a headline. Instead, they returned to the chandeliered noise where the band leaned into a pleasant standard. Derek walked beside Isabella, skin humming with questions he had trained himself not to ask. He had no father stories, only a shoebox of photos and a note in his mother's hand about a brief summer and a long goodbye. Marcus meant nothing, and also too much. He kept pace, poured water again, signed the silent roles assigned to him, and watched Elliot orbit the room like a planet, considering whether to risk another pass. At 9, he stepped aside into a quiet anteroom and called home. Mia answered on the first ring with a whisper thick with triumph. I waited. He opened the Fox story and read the familiar lines, voice steady, letting the words settle her breathing. Isabella paused outside the doorway and did not interrupt. When the chapter ended, Mia asked for one more sentence invented just for her. He delivered a promise featuring a brave rabbit and a returning moon. Sleep now, he said. The silence after goodbye pressed hard, then eased. He pocketed the phone and returned to the music. Back at the table, Isabella's composure had settled like pressed linen, though the fabric still remembered earlier hands. She leaned close enough that only he would hear. Elliot is not harmless, she said. He prefers people who cannot answer back. Old business with my father, old leverage, old threats polished to look like courtesy. Tonight he expected me unaccompanied. He saw you and chose a ghost to throw into my path. I am sorry for that. Derek absorbed the words as one absorbs sudden weather. I can stand, he said simply. She nodded, grateful in a way that hid itself. The band teased a slow number, and couples floated into the clear space, like ships leaving safe harbor. Isabella did not ask him to dance, and he did not ask her. Standing together felt sufficient and clean. The earlier donor returned, smaller now in Derek's eyes, his smile dimmed by the failure of an earlier assessment. Congratulations on your companion, he chirped to Isabella, intent on a harmless slight. Derek smiled as if the words were air and spoke about the hospital wing instead, steady and specific. He had learned to make rooms safer without raising his voice or fists. Elliot approached once more near the cloakroom, expression bland as folded paper. Miss Hamilton, he said, I hope your evening is productive. My father valued these events. She replied with immaculate politeness that neither invited nor feared him. Derek stood a step behind, present without challenge. Elliot's eyes slid to him again, curious, then calculating. Some names return, he murmured, almost to himself, as if recalling a ledger entry that refused to balance. Isabella's smile cooled another degree. Some debts come due, she answered. Elliot inclined his head and disappeared into the orchids. Derek understood he was now inside history. When the last speech surrendered and the crowd thinned, the car carried them back through streets that had traded glitter for quiet. Isabella kept her eyes on the window, as if reading the city's tired script. Thank you for lending me steadiness, she said finally. He nodded. Thank you for paying me fair, he added, because truth belonged in the car with them. She almost smiled. At his building, he paused with the door open. If you need a witness who says sensible things slowly, I have nights, he said. I might, she answered. The rabbit rode in his pocket. Upstairs, Mia slept diagonally with a blanket half surrendered, and Comet a sleepy guard at her shoulder. Derek set the tuxedo on a hanger and placed cufflinks on the counter like coins from another country. He sat on the couch and let the night unspool at human speed. "Marcus," he said into the dark, the syllables falling without permission. The room held his quiet and returned it without advice. Tomorrow would bring returns, receipts, and daylight questions. He would keep his promise, read again, go to work, stand steady. But the name kept breathing near the door, patient and persistent. The night after the gala stretched long inside Derek's apartment. He had laid the tuxedo carefully across the back of a chair, as if even borrowed cloth deserved respect. And he had placed the cufflinks in a dish beside Mia's collection of plastic jewelry. She stirred once in her sleep, murmuring to the stuffed rabbit. And Derek sat on the couch with his head bowed, listening to the kind of silence that refuses to leave. The name still lingered in the air. Marcus. He had never heard anyone call him that. Not his mother, not friends from school, not anyone in the years since he had been left with little more than photographs and a note she kept folded inside an old shoebox. But Elliot had spoken it like a truth that belonged to him, like an accusation and a revelation bound together. Derek whispered it once, tasting the syllables, and then forced himself to close his eyes. He was steady, he reminded himself. And steady men do not collapse simply because someone else carries a secret. Still, the secret did not leave. The next morning came with a rush of school lunches and misplaced shoes. Mia hummed while tying her laces too loosely. Derek noticed and then threw her arms around his neck before running toward the neighbor who would walk her to school. He waved, watched until she turned the corner, and only then checked his phone. One message. From Isabella. "Thank you again. There may be questions later. Lunch tomorrow?" He hesitated. Men like him did not share lunches with women like her, at least not in daylight. Yet something in her tone precise, but edged with weariness, made it less of an invitation and more of a request. He typed back a single word. Yes. The restaurant she chose was quiet, the kind with white tablecloths and silverware that seemed to wait politely. Derek felt underdressed even in his best shirt, but Isabella smiled when she saw him, and that softened the room. She ordered tea. He asked only for water. For a few moments they said nothing, listening instead to the muted clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Then she leaned forward. "Elliot is my uncle. He has complicated history with my father. Last night, when he saw you, he thought you were someone else." "Marcus," Derek said, carefully. Her eyes flickered. "Yes. My cousin. He disappeared years ago. There were whispers, disagreements, money gone missing. He would be around your age now." The resemblance startled him. That's all. Derek let the words settle. They sounded rehearsed, but not false. He nodded slowly. "I'm not Marcus. My name is Derek Caldwell. My mother raised me alone. That's the truth, I know." Isabella studied him, perhaps trying to measure the weight of his calm. Finally, she sighed. "Then let Elliot be haunted by his own ghosts. I don't want them following you." Something softened between them in that moment, not romance yet, but recognition. Two people used to carrying burdens quietly, acknowledging the silence can be heavier than words. Days turned into weeks. Derek returned to his night shifts, the scent of polish and wax clinging to him like second skin, while Isabella continued her orbit of meetings, foundations, and obligations. Yet, they found reasons to meet again, sometimes at a cafe near Mia's school, sometimes on park benches where anonymity was possible. Mia noticed, of course. Children always do. One afternoon she sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring, while Derek sorted bills. She looked up with the directness of 7 years. "Daddy, do you like Miss Hamilton?" He nearly dropped the envelope in his hand. "She's a friend." Mia grinned, unbothered by his caution. "She smiles different when you're around, like when Mrs. Rodriguez brings me hot chocolate." Derek chuckled, pulled her close, and kissed the top of her head. He did not answer further. Some truths belonged to time. The first time Isabella visited their apartment openly was on a rainy Saturday. She had insisted on bringing pastries, though Derek protested. Mia answered the door before he could, and for a long moment simply stared up at the elegant woman holding a white box tied with string. "Hello, Mia," Isabella said gently. "I brought something sweet. May I come in?" Mia blinked, then nodded solemnly. "Only if you like stories." "I love stories," Isabella replied. From that moment, Mia adopted her. They sat together at the kitchen table, crumbs scattered between coloring pencils and coffee mugs. Mia showed her drawings of foxes and stars, and Isabella listened as if each picture were a masterpiece. Derek watched from the stove, heart unsettled by how easily his daughter had welcomed this stranger into their fragile world. Later that evening, when Mia slept with sticky fingers curled around her rabbit, Isabella lingered by the window. Rain traced the glass. "You've built something steady for her," she said softly. "More than most children ever receive." Derek shook his head. "It never feels enough." Her eyes met his. "Enough isn't measured in money. It's measured in presence, and you are present." He wanted to believe her, but Elliot did not vanish. At another gala, weeks later, Derek accompanied Isabella again, this time more comfortable in the role of steady shadow. Elliot appeared by the piano, glass in hand, voice honeyed, but eyes sharp. "You're persistent," he murmured, glancing at Derek. "But persistence doesn't make you family." Derek felt the sting, but he refused to rise. "I don't need to be family to be loyal," he said simply. Elliot's lips thinned. He stepped closer to Isabella, lowering his voice. "Be careful. Attachments like this cost more than you think." For the first time, Isabella did not retreat. "Some costs are worth paying," she said clearly, loud enough for others nearby to hear. Elliot stiffened, mask cracking. He withdrew, but Derek knew the battle was not finished. One Sunday, Isabella joined Derek and Mia at the park. Children darted through the grass, kites tangled in branches. Mia tugged Isabella's hand, dragging her toward the swings. Derek followed, watching them laugh together, a sight both joyous and frightening. When Mia ran off to chase a ball, Derek spoke. "She's growing attached." Isabella turned, eyes steady. "So am I." The words hung between them, heavy with promise. Derek inhaled slowly, heart pounding in ways polish and routine never caused. He thought of Lena, his late wife, and the promise he had made to raise Mia with love. Was it betrayal to imagine another woman in their lives? Or was it honoring love itself, to let it grow again? He had no answer yet. The answer arrived one evening when Mia fell ill. A fever, sudden and sharp. Derek rushed her to the clinic, fear clawing at him. Isabella arrived without being asked, slipping into the waiting room like a guardian. She held Derek's trembling hand as the doctor spoke calmly about flu, hydration, rest. Nothing dangerous, but enough to rattle a father already stretched thin. When Mia finally slept, cheeks flushed but breathing steady, Derek sat at her bedside. Isabella placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone." The words pierced him deeper than any insult Elliot had thrown. He looked up, tears unshed, and whispered, "But alone is all I've ever known." "Then let it change," she answered. From then on, change arrived gradually. Isabella began visiting more often, not as employer, not as benefactor, but as someone who wanted to belong. She read bedtime stories when Derek worked late, braided Mia's hair on mornings he was too tired, and filled the apartment with small touches of gentleness. Derek resisted at first, wary of gifts that might disappear, but he could not deny the warmth returning to their home. Elliot confronted Isabella once more, this time in her family study, Derek present by her side. The older man sneered. "Do you really imagine a janitor can stand beside you in this house? He has nothing." This related his vesture. Isabella straightened, her voice clear. "He has everything that matters. Integrity, steadiness, love. You can't buy those." Derek said nothing. Her defense was enough. Elliot's power waned after that night. Rumors spread. Allies withdrew. And though he remained, his threats carried less weight. Months passed. The Hamilton mansion hosted another gala, but this time Derek did not arrive as a shadow. He arrived as himself, Mia's small hand in his, Isabella's arm linked through the other. Guests murmured, some curious, some disapproving, but Isabella smiled with quiet defiance. When the music swelled, Derek bent down to Mia. "Shall we dance?" he asked. She giggled, placing her tiny feet on his shoes, clinging to his hands as he guided her clumsily across the floor. Isabella watched, eyes bright with something softer than pride, something closer to love. Later, under the chandelier's glow, Isabella whispered to Derek, "Do you ever regret saying yes that night, in the foyer?" He shook his head. "That yes gave me back more than I thought I'd ever have." The story closed not with fireworks, but with quiet certainty. Derek returned each night to the same small apartment, but it no longer felt like a place of waiting. Isabella was there often, laughter mingling with Mia's, the scent of pastries in the air. Elliot's shadow faded into the background, powerless against the light they created together. And one evening, as Mia tugged Isabella's sleeve and asked, "Will you stay for the fox story?" Isabella nodded, settling beside them on the couch. Derek opened the familiar book, his voice steady, and for the first time he read not as a man filling silence, but as a man surrounded by a child safe in his arms, by a woman who had chosen to sit with them, by a future that finally seemed possible. Steady men keep promises, and sometimes, if the world is merciful, promises lead them home.